When Elijah Ford arrived in the town of Halebrook, the mist had already begun to settle low and thick across the cracked asphalt. His rental car rolled past crooked wooden signs and shuttered gas stations, the kind you'd expect to find in stories that never end well. According to the archives, Halebrook's population had once hovered around 2,000. That was before the sinkhole in '97, before the fires, before the disappearances. Now it was just a place that locals in surrounding counties pretended didn't exist. Elijah, a journalist specializing in fringe religious movements, was drawn to Halebrook by a series of threads posted to a now-defunct occult forum. The user who posted them had gone by the name, Glassmoth84. In one post, they claimed a small town in Pennsylvania had become the heart of the last real cult in America, calling themselves the Pale Choir. They don't worship a god, the thread began, they believe they remember one. That line had haunted Elijah for weeks. He pulled into a crumbling motel just outside the town center. The neon sign above the office was cracked and humming. Inside, the clerk didn't even look up from his newspaper. Elijah signed in with a false name, not for safety, but instinct. The kind of instinct you develop when you've written too many stories that ended in funerals. That night, Elijah walked the edge of the town. The street lamps here flickered irregularly, buzzing like flies in jars. He passed rusting mailboxes, empty playgrounds, and houses with drawn curtains. He noticed something strange. Almost every doorframe had a small, circular carving above it. A single, perfect ring. The town square still had a stone well at its center, capped with rusted iron. Across the square stood what had once been a church, now painted matte black. No crosses, no signage, just darkness pressing outward like something trying to get back in. Elijah returned to the motel just past midnight. On the bed was a flyer that hadn't been there before. It was printed in plain black ink on pale paper. It read, "The full moon opens what the sun denies. The choir gathers. Listen close. Sing when called." On the back, only a date, August 15th, 3 nights from now. He didn't sleep. He just listened. To the silence. And to the soft, near imperceptible humming that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards. The next morning, Elijah wandered into what passed for a diner. It was run by a woman named Marla who spoke without inflection and served only black coffee and toast. When Elijah asked about the symbol on the doorframes, her face twitched. "It keeps them out," she said. "Them?" Elijah asked. Marla poured more coffee and didn't answer. Later that day, he found the library. A single room with water-stained ceiling tiles and rows of yellowed books. The librarian was a tall man with a limp and glassy eyes. When Elijah asked about the Pale Choir, the man tilted his head like a bird. "There's no choir," he said. "Only memory." Elijah asked to see the town's old records. The man didn't speak, just turned, walked behind the desk, and unlocked a door. Inside was a narrow staircase, descending into darkness. "No lights down there," the librarian said, handing him a flashlight. The basement smelled of mold and something older. Elijah searched through boxes of old church pamphlets, birth records, faded photographs. One folder, marked abyssal year, contained hand-written notes from what appeared to be a former preacher. "Greater than they sing without mouths. They pray without gods. I have seen the truth beneath the stone well. I have heard the song in my sleep. It is not salvation, it is memory that feeds." Elijah emerged from the basement an hour later, pale and shaken. The librarian was gone. So was the flashlight. He ran back to his motel to find his door ajar. The flyer was gone from the table. In its place was a second note, this time handwritten in jagged ink. "You have been seen. The choir remembers. Prepare to sing. The next 2 nights blurred together. Elijah barely ate, barely moved. He watched the moon grow full through his window. On the night of the 15th, he followed the sound, a low, bone-deep humming, into the woods at the edge of Halebrook. There, in a clearing ringed with dead trees, stood 20 figures in robes of pale gray. Their faces were masked with porcelain visors, blank and expressionless. In the center of the circle was the stone well from the town square. But here, it was uncovered, and something pulsed within its depths. Something wet and rhythmic and alive. As Elijah approached, the figures began to sway. Not to a melody, but to a rhythm buried deep beneath perception. The kind of rhythm that existed before time. One of them removed their mask. It was Marla. Her eyes were milk white. "You've heard it," she whispered. "Now sing." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Only the sound he'd been hearing since he arrived. It poured out of him like smoke. Like rot. The circle closed in. The moon passed its apex. The earth opened. Halebrook remained where it always had. But the next morning, the well in the town square was gone. So was Elijah, and every house had a new mark above the doorframe, a perfect circle, with a line drawn straight through it. The days after the disappearance of Detective Morrow passed like smoke over glass, visible but fleeting, as if the town itself refused to hold on to memory. Graywater was quieter now, not in a peaceful way, but in that dreadful hush of a waiting breath. People stayed indoors. Storefronts darkened earlier than usual. Even the birds seemed to have fled the edges of town, leaving behind only their absence and the occasional echo of a crow's cry that no one could place. The sky had taken on a strange permanent dusk. Clouds lingered like bruises, low and unmoving. Elena Morrow sat on the steps of the old courthouse, clutching a crumpled copy of the Graywater Tribune. Her father's face stared back at her from the front page. Local detective vanishes during investigation. Police baffled. But she knew better. She'd seen the tapes, watched the last footage captured by his dash cam before it glitched and went black. There was a shape in the trees. A slow, sinuous figure clothed in what looked like rags or perhaps moss. And behind it, eyes. So many eyes, wide and glowing pale white in the darkness. Elena hadn't told anyone, not even her mother, because something was happening in Graywater. And whatever had taken her father hadn't finished. She visited the Graywater Public Library, a place untouched by modernization, where dust softened the corners of time and silence was heavier than air. Deep in the archives, she found references to something called the Hollow Choir. The pages were fragmented, written in almost poetic riddles. Greater than they watch when the moon is wrong. They sing when no voice should break the night. The hollow ones who walk backward through time. And once your eyes widen, you are theirs. It wasn't the first time people had vanished in Graywater. But it was the first time someone had returned. She found that case buried under layers of newspaper clippings, 1956. A boy named Aaron Trask, 12 years old, missing for 3 months, returned one night to his family's porch, barefoot and silent. He never spoke again. His eyes were bone white. Not blind, just wrong. He would spend the rest of his life in the St. Mary's Asylum until it burned down in 1972, with him inside. Elena scanned the documents again and again, searching for meaning. There were symbols in the margins, circles, eyes, a spiral bisected with teeth. They reminded her of the carvings found in the woods near the church ruins. No one went there now. That night, she broke in. The church ruins were hollow, half swallowed by the forest. What remained of the steeple leaned like a crooked finger pointing toward a pale, bulging moon. The stone was slick with moisture, the air thick with rotten pine. Inside, the sanctuary was littered with animal bones, melted wax, and symbols carved freshly into the wood of the old pews. The spiral again, and beneath the altar, steps. She hesitated, but something moved behind her. A whisper with no breath. She descended. The underground chamber was massive, hewn from black stone, lit by dozens of dim, yellow candles that flickered though there was no breeze. In the center, a pool of water perfectly still and black as oil. Around it, figures knelt. Hooded, silent. They did not acknowledge her. But as Elena stepped closer, one of them turned. Beneath the hood, her father's face. Pale, blank, and eyes, white as marble. He didn't speak, only lifted a hand and pointed to the pool. She looked into it, and saw the town of Graywater. But wrong. Empty streets. Blood on the walls of the diner. The school engulfed in flame. The clock tower ticking backward. Her own house. Shattered windows, a woman sobbing inside. Then she saw herself, kneeling among them. Robes black, hands bloody. Eyes white, mouth open in song though no sound came out. The choir began to hum. She ran. Out of the chamber, out of the ruins, into the woods. The trees whispered, leaves moved without wind. The spiral followed her, etched in bark, carved in stone, burned into her vision. Elena reached home just before dawn, hands shaking, mud to her knees, a scratch down her cheek that she didn't remember getting. Inside, the lights flickered. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You're invited to join the choir. Attached. A video. She opened it. It was her. In the chamber. Kneeling. Singing. Behind her. Hundreds of figures. All with white eyes. All looking at her. The air in Graywater changed after that night. It wasn't just colder, it tasted wrong. People noticed it in little ways. Meat spoiling too fast in the fridge, clocks running 10 minutes late no matter how often they were fixed, and the silence that would settle right before dawn like a held breath. Elena stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the song. The low, humming drone of the hollow choir rising from beneath the town, beneath her house, beneath her skin. She boarded up the windows, covered the mirrors, but it didn't help. On the third night, she awoke at 3:03 a.m., standing in the backyard barefoot, a knife in her hand, fresh soil on her fingers. She'd dug something, or maybe unburied it. There were symbols carved in her palm. She hadn't done it, had no memory of it. But they bled slowly and refused to heal. Her phone rang. It was the same unknown number. This time, the message read, "You are the harmony," and below it, a map. A blinking red dot in the woods beyond the old street. Mary's asylum ruins. The place that had burned. The place where the white-eyed boy had died. She went, armed with a flashlight, a backpack of supplies, and her father's old revolver. Elena entered the forest. The trees bent unnaturally. The path twisted in ways that made no sense. She passed the same dead fox 3 times, its body more decomposed each time. Then, the ground dropped away. The ruins of St. Mary's were blackened, skeletal remains of a place built for the broken. Yet beneath the scorched floor, a door had been uncovered. Stone and iron, with no handle. But it opened when she touched it. Down the steps, the spiral appeared again, etched into the walls. The ceiling, her thoughts. A massive underground chapel greeted her. And in it, her father. Still alive, still silent, but this time, he approached. He pressed something into her hands. A book, bound in what she knew wasn't leather. No title, no pages, only a spiral that moved when she blinked. "You must sing," he said at last, voice raw and hollow. And then he opened his mouth wider than should be possible. From it poured a noise like thousands of mouths whispering in perfect unison, chanting words she didn't understand but somehow remembered. Her legs buckled. Blood dripped from her ears. The others joined him, one by one, white-eyed, humming, circling her. She opened the book, and screamed, not in pain, in recognition. She woke up in her bedroom, drenched in sweat. It was morning. Birds chirped. A car honked in the distance. The world seemed normal. But the book was on her desk. Open. The spiral spinning. Her voice was hoarse. She had been singing in her sleep. Elena stopped going outside. Her skin had begun to pale. Her eyes were sensitive to light. The spiral was no longer on paper, it danced behind her eyelids. She saw it in puddles, in coffee foam, in the iris of her own reflection. Then the news broke. 8 more people had vanished. All connected. All former members of the Graywater Town Council. All of them had approved a development project 10 years ago, one that broke ground in a forgotten part of the forest, where something old had been buried. The project was halted when workers reported voices in the trees and vanished equipment. But no one had taken them seriously. Until now. Elena found the site. It was a pit, black stone around the edges. No tools, no birds. But at the bottom, bodies. They were not rotting. They were waiting, eyes wide and white. She went back to the chapel under Street Mary's. This time, the figures bowed. They began to chant. The spiral on her skin burned with light. She stepped into the center and spoke the final verse. Greater than we are not alone. We are not awake. We are not afraid. We are the choir. The chapel shuddered. The ground split. And the song poured out. Across Graywater. Across every phone, radio, TV screen. And those who heard it, joined. The town was no longer a town. It was a mouth. And it had begun to sing. The silence after the song was worse than the song itself. Graywater was quiet for 3 whole days. No phones rang. No birds sang. No children cried. People walked the streets with white eyes and soft, humming throats. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They were connected. Elena saw them through her window. Mothers pushing empty strollers. Mailmen dropping letters into boxes marked, deceased. A bride in a tattered wedding dress pacing the town square, humming the same 4-note tune. The choir had taken the town. And it was growing. From her window, she saw the highway clogged with cars that had simply stopped. Drivers inside, frozen, hands clutched to their chests, mouths parted in permanent, silent harmony. Her TV flickered even when unplugged, showing a static spiral that spun faster the longer she stared. Every channel played the same footage. An overhead view of Graywater. The town's streets formed a perfect spiral. It had always been there. Hidden. Waiting. Elena no longer needed to eat. She still could, but the hunger had changed. It wasn't for food. It was for sound. For vibration. For voices joined in unity. She remembered things she had never learned. Rituals, symbols, names not meant for human mouths. And worst of all, she remembered the face. The being beneath the spiral. Not a god. Not a demon. An ear. The choir didn't worship it. They fed it. Through sound. Through us. It had slumbered for centuries, deep beneath the crust of the world. Graywater had been the tuning fork. The hymn book. The first verse. But not the last. They came for her on the 5th night. Hundreds of them, led by the white-eyed child she thought had died in the fire. His skin was unburned now. Clean. He held a bone staff wrapped in barbed wire and orchids. They did not break down her door. They waited. She opened it on her own. They parted to let her through. The boy smiled. Elena, he said, you're late for the recital. Dash dash dash. They led her to the heart of Graywater. The town square had changed. No longer paved. Now obsidian, polished, reflecting the moon like a blind eye. A stage stood in the center. Black wood and bone, and at its center, the book. Still open, still spinning, still waiting. The crowd surrounded her in perfect silence. She stepped forward. Her blood burned. Her throat itched with unfamiliar syllables. She didn't want to, but she had to. Her mouth opened, and the final song began. Dash dash dash. It wasn't just Graywater anymore. The song reached neighboring towns in minutes. Cities within hours. People forgot their names, their pasts, their individuality. They joined, willingly. The song made it easier. No more pain, no more loss, just unity, just the spiral, and deep below, the thing that listened stirred. Not fully awake, but aware, and hungry. Dash dash dash. Some resisted, in bunkers, in mountains, in remote stations with no signal. They called themselves the Discordants. They spoke in broken rhythms. Wore white noise generators like rosaries. They painted their homes in jagged angles, made sharp sounds, and kept their mouths shut. Elena hunted them. She was the conductor now. Dash dash dash. She found one hiding in the ruins of an old subway station. A teenage girl with cracked glasses and a bat covered in nails. You don't have to fight, Elena said. The girl screamed a frequency so sharp it shattered every bulb in the tunnel. Elena staggered, blood streaming from her ears, laughing through the pain. Beautiful, she whispered, a new note, and she dragged the girl into the spiral. Dash dash dash. The choir spans now beyond America. The oceans hum at midnight. Storms arrange themselves in perfect loops. The moon turns slightly each night, inching toward alignment. When it completes its rotation, the face will open, and the world will fall silent. Dash dash dash. You may think you're safe, that you've never heard the song. But you have. It's in the buzz of your fridge, the whir of your fan, the static between stations, the pause between your thoughts. And when you hum to yourself without realizing it, when the tune doesn't sound familiar but feels right, that's the spiral, singing back.